Welcome guys, I'm TJ. Welcome to New Zealand Mysteries. We are a community who want to bring awareness to missing persons and unsolved murders, mainly in New Zealand, but some stories from around the world as well. Sorry about my audio, but I don't have any flash equipment or anything. I'm just using my laptop. Hopefully in time I can upgrade and it will sound better. Links to our Facebook page and website are in the description box below. That's where you'll also find my email and links to all my sources that I've used for this. I'm a one-woman operation, so if you'd like to support the channel, it would be greatly appreciated. And links to that are also in the description box. Any help is fantastic. If you like the content, remember to click the subscribe button, and when it pops up, choose all, so you'll be notified when there's another episode being released, and share and like, that would be nice as well. Okay, quickly, I just want to say my disclaimer. I don't mean any disrespect or hurt genuinely to anyone, to any family members or people that have been involved in these cases. It's all just information that I've found online, and I'm putting it all together into one video. My aim is to raise awareness to those cases. I don't want the victims' stories to be forgotten. They deserve to be heard. And that's what I want to do. A lot of these stories just need to be seen by the right person or the right people. And I'm hoping that if we share everywhere, that the right people will see and speak up finally, and maybe provide some answers for families that are in grief and hurting. Alright, let's get into it. On April the 28th, 1998, Claire Hills, a 30-year-old woman known as Lisa, was discovered in the back seat of her black Mazda hatchback in an isolated Mangere car park. She had been tied up, doused with petrol, and burnt alive. This truly is one of the most horrific stories that I've had to research and cover, and I suggest if you're squeamish, it might not be the one for you. It's truly horrible. I first want to give you a bit of a description of where she was found. Mangere Mountain in Mangere Domain is one of the largest volcanic cones in the Auckland volcanic field, obviously in New Zealand. It's with a peak of 106 metres, which is 348 feet above sea level. It was the site of a major pa, which is a Maori fortified settlement, and many of the pa's earthworks are still obvious. It has extensive panoramic views of Auckland from its location in the suburb of Mangere. It is also known as Te Pane o Mataho. Claire Elizabeth Hills was born in England and emigrated to Australia with her parents and siblings when she was just 2 years old. The family lived in a hostel for around 5 months before buying a house in Wollongong, where they settled. And Wollongong, hopefully I'm saying that right, I'm not massacring it, is a coastal city of Sydney. Claire had 5 siblings, and she was the third child in the family. When Claire was 15, she took off from the family home with her boyfriend, a young man her father did not approve of. And haven't we heard that story a lot, even in true crime? Claire spent time working on fishing boats in Melbourne before she took off again, this time to Auckland, New Zealand. She used a fake passport under the name Lisa, and she went on to use that name in life after that. So we're going to use the name Lisa, but bear in mind some of the articles and interviews that are coming up are going to refer to her as Claire. So Lisa, Claire, same person. At the age of 21, Lisa became a Jehovah's Witness and later went on to marry a man named Peter. And Lisa went on to work various jobs throughout the years. Around 18 months before she died, Lisa's marriage to Peter broke down. She moved into a small flat of her own in Herne Bay. Wikipedia describes Herne Bay as an affluent suburb of Auckland, New Zealand. It is located on the southwestern shore of the Waitemata Harbour to the west of the Auckland Harbour Bridge. Now, I've got the map on the screen. I myself live in the South Island, and I've never been to the North Island and never been to Auckland. So I wouldn't have a clue where anything is, but hopefully that map helps you a little bit. Lisa's sisters, Linda Hinson and Alison Harris, spoke to reporters. They said that Lisa had been estranged from the family, but eventually reconciled with them. They said she seemed to have a happy life in New Zealand and she quite liked it. She didn't think she would ever return to Australia, and she had really settled in New Zealand. Lisa was working for McDonald's as a manager, and only a week before she was murdered, she moved to the branch at the Auckland airport. She was the manager of the day shift, which started at 3:30 a.m. So for Lisa, her routine would usually be to set her alarm for 2:30 a.m, shower, dress, and then drive her black Mazda Familia hatchback 28 kilometres to the airport. And if we look at that map before, you can see from Herne Bay to the airport, the Auckland airport there, and it's about half an hour, so 28 k's, not too bad. At 6:30, actually before that, the day that Lisa was killed, she was going back to work after 2 rostered days off. Then at 6:31 a.m. on the 28th of April, firefighters responded to a car fire at Mangere Mountain. Their response was initially delayed by a police officer who took the initial 111 call, and he failed to action it. But when fire crews did get there, they managed to put out the fire in just over 5 minutes. When a senior fire officer approached the car, he could make out a charred body in the back seat. Police were called and they launched a homicide investigation. Lisa was identified as the victim through dental records, and police found her McDonald's staff name tag, which had survived the fire, in the back of her car. From then on, the investigation was called Operation Hills. A post-mortem was performed on Lisa's body. It revealed that Lisa was alive when her car was set on fire, but most probably, hopefully, she was unconscious. The pathologist found that her lungs were heat damaged and full of soot. She had numerous fractures to her skull and the bones around her throat. The pathologist was unable to determine if these injuries were caused by the fire or as a result of an earlier assault. There was also evidence that Lisa had been sexually assaulted. Lisa's official cause of death was listed as carbon monoxide poisoning. Police appealed to the public for any sightings of Lisa's black Mazda Familia between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. that morning. They revealed also that the fuel used to ignite the fire must have been sourced by the killer. There had been nothing around the car that was found that could have been used to set the vehicle on fire. That means that the killer probably had to have gone to a service station to buy fuel in like a container or stolen it. Police also revealed that Lisa had a steering wheel lock she used regularly to secure her car, and that was missing. So police believed the killer took it, and if they found the steering wheel lock, they would find the killer. But that was never found. We'll talk about a couple of witnesses. There was a woman who had witnessed the incident, and she spoke publicly for the first time in an article for the Herald on Sunday. The links are below. She said, "I won't forget it. I was going to the mountain at about 5:45 a.m. and as I got closer, I saw a man moving around a car at the soccer club. The next thing I saw, the thing go up in flames. I just stood there and watched it. It was like an inferno." She goes, "I remember as I stood there thinking, if someone was in that car, there'd be no way anyone could get near it to help them. The whole thing was engulfed in flames like a furnace." She goes on to say, The person ran away. He didn't know I was there. He ran straight towards me. Then he realised I was there. He just stopped and we eyeballed each other for a minute. Then he turned and ran back the same way he had come. She said he definitely got a fright to see me. The woman went to a nearby property and asked a man there to ring 111. The woman said that later that day, about 3 p.m, that man called her at work to tell her that there had been a body in that car. She said, when he told me that, I felt sick. It wasn't nice. I tried to keep the vision of that man in my mind just in case. I don't know how this poor woman stayed at work that day with that on her mind. That's awful. And I'd say she's going to remember this for the rest of her life. That's so tragic. Absolutely horrible. There were 3 other people reported that see a man of similar description not long after Lisa's car was in flames. There was a jogger at the domain that saw the man run away. There was a taxi driver on the motorway, and he said a man ran out in front of his car. And another motorist saw a man walking towards the Mangere Bridge shops. The descriptions from the witnesses helped police to create a sketch of the killer. Mr. Muaulu, who was 18 at the time, was the duty manager at McDonald's the night before Lisa's murder, and he spoke to the Herald on Sunday. Now, for this part, I'm going to just call him Mr. M because I'm going to just crucify that name, and I don't want to cause any disrespect to anyone by saying it improperly. So Mr. M said that he had called Lisa the night before to discuss stock. He said, I called her about 9:45 p.m. I forgot that she was supposed to be starting work at 3:30 a.m. I needed permission to give this other store our stock. We had a quick conversation and that was it. Everything seemed normal. He says, I knew her as Lisa. She wasn't there long, meaning at the airport branch, before the incident happened. I remember that day very clearly. Mr. M was woken up at 3:30 a.m. on that morning of the 28th of April by a phone call. He says it was the store calling to say that Lisa hadn't shown up for work. I was getting in trouble because they thought that she must have called in sick and that I'd forgotten to leave a message. Poor bugger. Later that morning, the cops arrived at my house, he said. They had found Lisa's car burned out at Mangere Mountain. They were trying to find out what conversation I'd had with her the night before. Police updated Mr. M during the day. First they told him that they had found something of interest in the burnt out car. Then later they confirmed that the something of interest was Lisa's body. Mr. M says, I was really upset. I just couldn't believe it. That poor boy was only 18 and I guarantee that he spent his life remembering this. That's just awful. There have been suspects named over the years and many have been investigated. Lisa's estranged husband Peter was looked at, obviously. The husband or ex-husband, boyfriend, whatever, always getting looked at. Police also looked at a recidivist rapist called William Mokaraka. Mokaraka was known to attack women in their homes in South Auckland while brandishing a knife around that time. Despite a lack of evidence, police initially believed that rapist William Mokaraka was responsible for her death and shelved the case for nearly 10 years in the hope that Mokaraka would confess. Now, I know that sounds awful, but we're thinking 1998. I don't know, DNA was probably in its infancy, even if it was around. I don't even know when it was in. Can't remember. So I suppose if it's kind of hard for them to do much investigating with no DNA to be done. But anyway, years later, after a DNA profile created with new technology in 2007, both men were eliminated as suspects when their DNA failed to match a sample taken from Lisa's body and that was believed to belong to the killer. Lisa's mum said after, "When we found out it wasn't him, we felt annoyed and let down. We were back where we started and that it hadn't been solved. It alarms me that someone's got away with murder. That's a great injustice. It shouldn't be allowed to happen." I agree with her. After a meeting with the New Zealand police, the family now believe the killer will not be found, as too much time has passed and they believe too many errors were made early in the investigation. Although they hold no malice against the detectives, her mum in particular feels the focus on Mokaraka, Lisa's involvement with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and the use of her Christian name may have hindered the investigation. She said, "People thought William Mokaraka killed a girl called Claire, but people didn't know her as Claire, except if they read the newspaper or watched TV. They knew her as Lisa," she said. Her family's growing pessimism comes as police revealed the DNA profile developed from the crime scene has made no match with their criminal database, which holds 123,000 profiles. At the time, the officer in charge of the case, Detective Senior Sergeant Dave Lynch, said the task now was to go back through the file and hopefully unearth new suspects. There were 2 rewards posted for Lisa's death. The first one was about 4 months after. At the time, it was one of the biggest ever offered in New Zealand, but it produced nothing significant. A second $50,000 reward was posted in 2009. It read, "A reward of $50,000 will be paid for material information or evidence which leads to the conviction of any person or persons responsible for the murder of Claire Hills. The Commissioner of Police will determine the amount of the reward and will apportion it if there is more than one claimant. An immunity against prosecution will be considered for any accomplice, not being the principal offender, who shall first give such information or evidence. This offer shall remain in force until October 1st, 2009. After that, police said they got around 70 calls, but again it failed to produce any information. At that time, back then, this was one of New Zealand's most barbaric cases, and even more disturbing was that police believed Lisa had been held for several hours before she was burned alive. They suspect she was abducted from her vehicle as she drove to the McDonald's airport restaurant from her home in Herne Bay about 3 a.m. The officer in charge of the case, Detective Senior Sergeant Dave Lynch, said at the time, although the reward produced nothing significant, there was still a lot of work for the inquiry team to finish. Mr. Lynch said, although the reward had formally expired, if anyone had significant information, a payout could be negotiated. He said there would certainly be an opportunity for someone who was financially motivated to collect it in the future. Miss Hills had nothing bad or criminal in her past, and Mr. Lynch said her family deserved the peace and comfort they would get by solving the crime. Any accomplice offering information would not be prosecuted, providing he or she was not the principal offender. You know, I would have thought if with the offer of immunity, or even before that, the reward, you think someone would have come forward for that, but obviously no one did. In June 2000, it was revealed that police had told Lisa's family that they knew who killed her, but did not have enough evidence for an arrest. Lois Green, Lisa's mum, who lives south of Sydney, said she thought of her daughter every day. She had taken hope from the frank letter from the officer in charge of the inquiry at this time, Detective Senior Sergeant Dale Candy of Otahuhu, who had taken a fresh look at the case. Lois said, I know it sounds a bit weird, but it is some consolation that they know who has done it and can keep their eye on them. They're just waiting for a slip-up or some more evidence to come in. In the letter, Detective Senior Sergeant Candy said a team of experienced detectives had reviewed every facet of the investigation to establish its competency. In all of the inquiries completed to date by the homicide team and the review team, she said, I am confident that the inquiry has unravelled our offender. Unfortunately, evidentially, we are a long way removed from being able to A. become focused solely on that offender, or B. constructively calling the offender to account for the actions. The restrictions unfortunately faced by staff on this inquiry rate amongst the highest on any homicide experienced in New Zealand. She told the New Zealand Herald that the letter was meant for the family as a message of hope. Candy stated, after a year's investigation, we have a good understanding or suspicion of what has occurred, but we are clearly not in a position to lay a charge, otherwise we would, she said. She goes on, Detective Senior Sergeant Candy said she believed the killer was a stranger to Claire, that he had some link to the Mangere area and that others may have been involved in the initial abduction. She believed it was an opportunistic crime and her biggest fear was that the killer or killers would strike again. One of Lisa's close friends at the time said she suspected Lisa had been abducted either as she arrived at the airport or possibly after being flagged down by the offender, pretending to be a stranded motorist. I have problems with this letter. I've never heard of such a letter. It's really good that the family took it as hope or, a good thing. It was a good thing for them. But I don't understand. It makes me really uncomfortable. If they know the killer, they know who it is, they've got DNA, why can't they get DNA of the killer to match it? I don't know if I've watched too much telly, but on TV they can follow him and get DNA from a smoke bud or a coffee cup or go through his rubbish or something. I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me. It's just something weird about it. But the important thing is it made the family feel better. So that is definitely the most important thing. In April 2018, an article was published by the Herald on Sunday. In this article, Detective Superintendent Dave Lynch, who originally worked on the case in 1998, spoke with a reporter, Annalise. When Lynch was asked about the DNA they had, he wouldn't disclose more about the sample, saying, it's something only police and the offender know about. He wants to keep that card close to his chest, along with a couple of other aspects of the investigation. But everything else the police knew about the murder had been shared publicly numerous times in a bid to flush out the person responsible. Detective Lynch said, from the time Claire got up around 2:30 a.m. to when her car caught fire up at the mountain, those 2 to 3 hours are an unknown for us, and the key to advancing the investigation is to fill in that window of time. He said that signing by the witness, the woman, is the only solid piece of information we have around who is directly connected with Claire's murder. He says there's a range of scenarios. One is that Claire was known to the killer, and the other was that she was the subject of a random attack, and how that attack occurred and where is obviously very much a focus of the investigation. He says, I'm still convinced there's a person or small group out there that know or have some very strong suspicions around what happened. I always hold out hope that one day someone will pick up that phone. He goes on, we don't need much. All we need is names. We do have the DNA profile to work with, and we are able to give assurance of confidentiality around information people are prepared to give us. That DNA profile has failed to match anyone in the New Zealand database, and that's made of people who have given samples after being arrested for criminal offending. Does this mean to me, so has the guy just never got in trouble ever again? I don't know, I watch a lot of true crime, and I'm sure you guys do too, and usually they don't just stick to one thing, they do more, but he's never been arrested. They've never had to take his DNA. You'd think that it's really hard. It must be really hard for him to stay under the radar for over 20 years. Does that mean he's left the country? I don't know. Police have also searched the Australian database and are now investigating what other overseas databases might be available. Lynch says, 20 years is a long time. We've got a family living in another country still looking for answers about what happened to Claire. It's not too late to give us a call. Lisa's family, however, have given up hope that her killer will never be found or ever be found, and I find that extremely sad. Lisa's two sisters, Linda Hinton and Alison Harris, spoke to reporters at the Herald on Sunday. Harris said, the chances of it ever getting solved are really slim. It makes us really upset that someone's walking around who has gotten away with murder. The impact you can't even describe, that much violence and no answers. She says, I don't think you ever accept it. You know it's happened and you get on with it, but it's always there. She goes on, why did you do this? Why did my sister suffer such a horrific death? Lisa's sisters believe that she was killed in a random attack. Hinton said, Claire was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a good human being. She didn't deserve that. For whatever reason they decided to murder her, she didn't deserve to die like that. Definitely didn't. Lisa's mum, Harris said her mother doesn't like to talk about it too much. She thinks that it has happened, nothing's going to change, and she has resigned herself to the fact that she is not going to find out what happened to Claire in her lifetime. I find that's just so incredibly sad. We've got no hope, they say, at all, and that it's going to be solved. It breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart that they've just absolutely given up. It must be such an awful feeling of hopelessness. She goes on to say, anniversaries, birthdays and Christmases, I think about her then. The horrificness of the crime is always in the back of my mind. Our family is not complete. There won't ever be any closure. She was just 30 years old. She didn't have children yet. She hadn't even lived. The sisters are thankful that the police file remains open and would be open until there was an arrest or resolution. Harris says it helps to think they're still thinking about her, even though there is no one actively working on the file. 20 years is a long time. Unless someone confesses, we will never know what happened. That story just broke my heart. Those poor people just having to go throughout their life and not even just having to know that their sister was murdered or daughter was murdered, but how horrific it was. I don't even know if I could go on if that happened to any of my children. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. And, you know, the reason I do this is because of these families, you know. So please share this, like it, mention it on Facebook, go to our Facebook page, share it from there. I think, you know, New Zealand's got 5 million people. How many of those are on Facebook and YouTube? If we can get it out to as many people as possible and get it into or under the eyes of the right person or the right people that know something, you know that thing, know a name, there may be something small that might help the case. If you know anything, please contact your local police station, or you can ring Crimestoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. You can also go to Crimestoppers online and anonymously go through them. That's crimestoppers-nz.org. Otherwise, you can just open Google, type in Crimestoppers, and it will magically appear. I want to thank you all for joining me. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.